Hey everyone! Tonight we're drifting back to a world of palace courtyards, dusty roads, perfumed gardens, and royal households where the definition of a reasonable pet was somewhat flexible. So dim the lights, settle in, and let the day become a little quieter. Tonight, we are going to wander through the strange relationship between ancient rulers and the animals they kept around them. Not ordinary dogs curled beside a fireplace, not a sleepy cat wandering through a kitchen. We are talking about monkeys and elephants, animals that were sometimes treated as pets, sometimes as symbols of wealth, sometimes as military equipment, and occasionally, rather confusingly, as members of the royal household. Because if you were an ancient king, apparently owning a large animal capable of flattening a small building was one way of making sure everyone understood that you were doing quite well. The fascinating thing is that kings did not keep exotic animals simply because they liked animals, although some certainly did. They kept them because animals could say things about power that words could not. A horse could show that you were wealthy. A lion could show that you were fearless. A peacock could show that you had expensive taste. But an elephant could stand quietly in the palace courtyard and communicate a rather more complicated message. It said that you controlled land, you controlled workers, you controlled armies, and, most importantly, you had enough resources to feed an enormous creature that could spend an entire afternoon eating leaves while everyone else stood around admiring it. That was luxury on a scale that was difficult to ignore. The story begins particularly well in ancient South Asia, where elephants had been part of human society for thousands of years. Long before they became associated with the grand processions of kings, elephants were already deeply embedded in the landscape. They lived in forests. They moved along familiar routes. They drank from rivers. They gathered in herds. And humans learned that, with extraordinary patience, elephants could be captured and trained. This did not mean they became tame in quite the same way as a dog. An elephant remained an elephant. It remained intelligent, powerful, emotional, and capable of making independent decisions, which was perhaps slightly inconvenient if you happened to be a king who had arranged an important ceremony around the assumption that your elephant would cooperate. Still, rulers found elephants extremely useful. They could carry heavy loads. They could transport people. They could be trained for warfare, and they could appear in religious ceremonies and royal processions. Over time, the elephant became associated with kingship itself. A ruler surrounded by elephants did not merely look wealthy. He looked powerful, and ancient rulers were very interested in looking powerful. This was especially important because ancient kings had a problem that modern people sometimes forget. There were no newspapers, no television, no official government website announcing that the king was, in fact, extremely important. The king had to demonstrate it physically. People needed to see the palace. They needed to see the guards. They needed to see the jewels. And sometimes they needed to see a line of enormous elephants walking slowly behind the royal procession. Naturally, the more impressive the elephant, the better. Some ancient Indian kingdoms developed highly organized systems for keeping and training elephants. Special elephant handlers cared for them. They were fed, washed, exercised, and trained. There were even traditions concerning which elephants were considered particularly suitable for kings and warfare. And this tells us something important. The royal elephant was not simply an oversized pet. It was part animal, part political theater. Imagine arriving at a royal city after traveling for weeks. You are tired. You are dusty. Your sandals are probably regretting their life choices. Then you approach the palace. And there, beside the entrance, is an elephant decorated with cloth, ornaments, and perhaps a ceremonial harness. It is enormous, it is calm, and it is standing there as if this is all perfectly normal. You might reasonably conclude that the person inside the palace has access to rather impressive resources. That was the point. Kings understood spectacle. They understood that power was easier to believe when it had a physical shape. And elephants had a very convincing shape. But there was another reason elephants became associated with rulers. They were difficult to obtain. A king could not simply walk into a forest, point at an elephant, and say, "That one." Well, he could try, but the elephant would probably have opinions. Capturing an elephant required knowledge, organization, trained personnel, and considerable effort. Keeping one required even more. An elephant needs enormous quantities of food. It needs water. It needs space. It needs experienced handlers. It can become dangerous if frightened or mistreated. So maintaining a collection of elephants demonstrated that a ruler possessed an organized state capable of supporting them. In that sense, the animals were almost living advertisements for government. The elephant was saying, without saying anything at all, that the king had resources. And ancient kings were very fond of advertising. The same idea appears in other civilizations. Rulers collected rare animals because rarity itself was valuable. If an animal came from a distant land, possessing one could demonstrate that the king's influence reached far beyond his own kingdom. This brings us gently to the monkey. Monkeys were smaller. They were certainly cheaper to maintain, and they were, depending on the species and circumstances, considerably more troublesome. But they had their own appeal. Monkeys were intelligent. They could manipulate objects. They could imitate people. They could be trained. And they behaved in ways that humans found strangely familiar, which is probably why people have been fascinated by them for a very long time. In ancient South Asia, monkeys also occupied an important place in religious and literary traditions. The most famous example is Hanuman, the monkey-associated divine figure in the Hindu epic tradition. Hanuman is portrayed as extraordinarily strong, devoted, clever, and capable of extraordinary feats. This made monkeys more than just amusing animals. They could carry symbolic meaning. A royal household keeping monkeys could therefore have several layers of significance. There was entertainment, there was exoticism, there was religious symbolism, and, of course, there was the simple pleasure of possessing something unusual. Royal courts have always had a weakness for unusual things. If an ordinary person saw a monkey climbing a tree, they might think, "There is a monkey." If a king saw one, he might think, "Excellent, put it in the palace garden." Because royal life had a strange habit of turning ordinary objects into symbols of status. A bowl was not merely a bowl. It might be made of gold. A horse was not merely a horse. It might have embroidered coverings. And a monkey was not merely a monkey. It might be brought from another region, housed in a special enclosure, given food by servants, and occasionally allowed to cause problems in a palace garden. We should also remember that ancient royal courts were places of constant observation. Everyone watched everyone. Courtiers watched the king. The king watched the courtiers. Foreign visitors watched the palace. Diplomats watched everything. And animals became part of this theater. A foreign visitor arriving at court might record the unusual animals he saw. Those descriptions could travel back home. Suddenly, the king's elephants and monkeys were part of his international reputation. This was especially useful when rulers wanted to impress foreign ambassadors. could show them your treasury, you could show them your soldiers, or you could show them an elephant wearing gold ornaments. There was no PowerPoint presentation, so the elephant had to do the work. And it did it quite effectively. Let's drift farther west now, toward the Mediterranean world. The ancient Greeks and Romans also developed a fascination with exotic animals. The Mediterranean was connected to a vast network of trade routes. Goods moved between Africa, Asia, Arabia, Egypt, and Europe, along with spices, textiles, precious stones, and other commodities. People encountered animals that were unfamiliar to them. Elephants became particularly important in the Hellenistic world. After the conquests of Alexander the Great, Greek-speaking kingdoms became more closely connected to regions where elephants were found. Some rulers acquired elephants for warfare. Others displayed them, and the appearance of an elephant could be enough to create an impression. Ancient armies eventually learned that elephants were not invincible. This was a lesson that required considerable experimentation. An elephant might frighten horses. It might break formations. It might carry soldiers or weapons. But elephants could also panic. And a panicked elephant is a rather serious logistical problem. There is something quietly amusing about the fact that ancient generals could spend months planning a battle only for the most expensive creature in the army to decide that today was not a good day for military service. Still, elephants remained valuable. The Seleucid kings, for example, maintained substantial numbers of war elephants. They became symbols of royal military power. The Ptolemies of Egypt also used elephants and participated in the wider networks that brought exotic animals into royal and imperial environments. But the story was not entirely about warfare. Royal courts were fascinated by animals because animals were a form of living geography. A strange creature told people that the world was large, and that the king had somehow managed to reach into that distant world and bring a piece of it home. This idea became even more obvious in Rome. Roman elites developed a remarkable appetite for exotic animals. Lions, leopards, crocodiles, giraffes, elephants, monkeys, birds from distant regions. Some were displayed privately. Others were used in public spectacles. The Roman elite were especially fond of demonstrating their access to things that ordinary people could not easily obtain. And the Roman Empire was large enough to make this possible. Animals could be transported from Africa and Asia toward the Mediterranean. The journeys were difficult. Some animals died. Others survived and arrived in unfamiliar environments surrounded by unfamiliar people. For the surviving animals, royal and aristocratic captivity could be a very strange existence. A creature that had once moved through a forest might suddenly find itself in a courtyard surrounded by stone walls. A monkey that had once lived among other monkeys might find itself sitting beside a wealthy Roman who thought it looked adorable, which, from the monkey's perspective, was probably not the most important development of the day. Yet these animals fascinated people. Roman writers sometimes described them with curiosity and wonder. They were proof of the empire's enormous reach. If Rome could bring an elephant from faraway lands into the center of the Mediterranean world, Rome could make the distant feel close. And that was one of the great psychological effects of empire. The world became a collection, and the emperor was, in a sense, the collector. The larger and stranger the collection, the more impressive the ruler appeared. Of course, emperors could also become rather carried away with the idea, because once you have everything, you need something new. A normal palace becomes boring. A normal horse becomes boring. A normal garden becomes boring. So perhaps what you need is a monkey, then perhaps two monkeys, then an elephant, and eventually someone is standing in the palace courtyard wondering why the emperor has decided that an animal collection is a reasonable use of the imperial budget. But this was not entirely frivolous. Ancient rulers were constantly using symbols, crowns, scepters, palaces, statues, temples, armies, and animals. All of these objects helped create an image of authority. The king did not simply have power. He needed to look like someone who had power, and elephants were exceptionally good at this. They were large enough to make ordinary humans appear small. They were intelligent enough to inspire respect. They were rare enough to suggest wealth. And they could be decorated until the poor creature looked like a moving royal treasure chest. So when we picture an ancient king beside an elephant, we should not think only of a ruler who loved animals. We should think about politics. We should think about symbolism. We should think about spectacle. And perhaps somewhere underneath all of that, we can allow for the simpler possibility. Maybe the king just really liked elephants. That possibility should not be dismissed. Ancient rulers were still human. They could become attached to animals. They could develop favorites. They could mourn them. They could spend enormous amounts of money caring for them. And sometimes, despite all the politics and symbolism, an elephant was simply an impressive creature that happened to be standing nearby, which is probably reason enough. So, as the palace quiets down and the lamps burn a little lower, we can leave our first royal courtyard behind. The elephants are still there. The monkeys are probably still getting into something they shouldn't. And somewhere inside the palace, a king is sleeping peacefully, entirely unaware that his expensive monkey has just stolen something from a servant. Naturally, nobody will tell him until morning, and by then, it will probably be someone else's problem. Let's drift slowly onward, toward the rulers who discovered that owning an elephant was impressive. By morning, the palace would begin to wake. Servants would open heavy wooden doors. Kitchen fires would be lit. Courtiers would begin appearing in carefully arranged clothing, already preparing to discuss matters that were probably much less important than they believed. And outside, in the royal animal quarters, the elephants would begin their own day. They did not care about court politics. They did not care about succession. They did not care which minister had offended which prince. They had much more pressing concerns: food, water, shade, and perhaps a little attention from their handlers. For a royal elephant, the morning could be surprisingly structured. These were not animals simply wandering around a palace garden. In many societies, elephants associated with kings were cared for by specialized handlers. They needed to know the individual animal, its temperament, its habits, its strengths, its weaknesses. An experienced handler could recognize when an elephant was becoming agitated. That knowledge mattered, because elephants were enormous, and an unhappy elephant did not need a particularly complicated plan. It simply needed to move. The relationship between elephant and handler could become extremely close. In South Asian traditions, mahouts often spent long periods with individual elephants. They worked with them, fed them, bathed them, trained them, and traveled with them. The elephant might therefore know its handler far better than it knew the king. This created a slightly amusing situation. The king might technically own the elephant, but the person the elephant actually listened to was the man who spent every day beside it. Royal They cleaned the enclosures. They prepared the food. They transported the animals. They dealt with illnesses. They repaired cages. They dealt with accidents. And they were probably the people who knew which monkey was most likely to bite someone, which was useful information, especially in a palace where everyone was already nervous enough. The elephant, meanwhile, became part of a much larger system. In ancient India, elephants could be used for warfare, transport, construction, hunting, ceremonial processions, and royal display. Their importance was so great that states developed systems for capturing and maintaining them. This was not something a small household could easily do. A king who possessed elephants therefore possessed infrastructure. There were forests where elephants could be found. There were specialists who could capture them. There were people who could train them. There were facilities where they could be kept. There were people who could feed them. There were people who could transport them. There were people who could treat them when they became sick. The elephant therefore represented an entire network of human labor. And kings loved symbols that quietly reminded everyone how many people worked for them. This is one reason royal animals are so interesting. They reveal the hidden machinery of ancient societies. When we see a king standing beside an elephant, we see the king. But behind the elephant are dozens or hundreds of people. Hunters, handlers, stable workers, farmers, traders, veterinarians of various kinds, guards, transport workers, and administrators. The elephant is the visible part. The system supporting it is mostly invisible. And ancient rulers understood the value of making invisible systems visible. A palace full of elephants told visitors that this kingdom had resources. A palace full of horses said something similar. But elephants carried additional associations. They were ancient creatures. They were powerful. They were difficult to control. And yet they were standing beside the throne. That was a useful metaphor. The king could claim that enormous natural power itself had been brought under his authority. At least that was the message. Whether the elephant agreed was not discussed. In some Indian kingdoms, elephants became deeply connected with royal ceremonies. They could appear in processions. They could carry rulers. They could be decorated with cloth and ornaments. Their tusks might be decorated. Their heads could be covered with elaborate ceremonial equipment. And the slow movement of an elephant created a particular kind of spectacle. It was not fast. It did not need to be. A horse could gallop past. An elephant simply arrived. Slowly, deliberately, with the quiet confidence of something that knows nobody is going to push it out of the way. And that made elephants excellent ceremonial animals. The king could sit above the crowd. The animal moved steadily beneath him. People saw the ruler from a distance. The entire arrangement emphasized hierarchy. The king was elevated. The elephant was enormous. The crowd was below. Everyone understood the picture, even if they did not understand the political speech being given. And there was another important detail. Elephants could become symbols of victory. A ruler who captured enemy elephants could treat them as trophies. In warfare, elephants were valuable enough that taking them from an opponent could be a meaningful achievement. The ancient world had its own version of displaying captured enemy equipment. Except some of the equipment was alive. Imagine defeating a rival kingdom and returning home with its banners, weapons, treasures, and several elephants. The elephants probably did not understand that they had changed political ownership. They simply wondered where their food was. but to the victorious king, they were evidence of conquest. The animal itself became a piece of political theater. And this brings us to one of the stranger aspects of royal animal ownership. Kings sometimes used animals to communicate messages about enemies. If an enemy ruler was associated with a particular animal, capturing or displaying that animal could carry symbolic meaning. The ancient world was full of this kind of symbolism. Animals appeared on coins. They appeared on banners. They appeared in statues. They appeared in temples. And they appeared in royal ceremonies. A ruler surrounded by animals was not merely surrounded by wildlife. He was surrounded by symbols. Of course, not every animal was symbolic. Sometimes a monkey was just a monkey, and this is where things become particularly entertaining, because monkeys were extremely good at becoming symbols of something entirely different: chaos. A monkey in a palace was an invitation to disorder. Monkeys are curious. They investigate objects. They climb. They grab things. They open things. They sometimes steal things. And unlike an elephant, a monkey is small enough to get away with it. A royal monkey could therefore become an unofficial palace celebrity. Visitors might be fascinated by it. Servants might be irritated by it. Children might adore it. And the king might find it amusing, until it stole something important. There is a long tradition across many cultures of keeping monkeys in wealthy households. Their intelligence made them fascinating. They could be taught tricks. They could imitate gestures. They could interact with humans in ways that felt almost strangely familiar. This familiarity was part of the attraction. A lion was impressive because it was obviously dangerous. A monkey was interesting because it seemed to be thinking, and perhaps it was. That was the unsettling part. When a monkey looked at a person and copied their behavior, people could imagine that the animal understood them. The boundary between human and animal seemed slightly thinner. Ancient people did not have modern zoological theories. They interpreted animals through religion, philosophy, folklore, and observation, and monkeys appeared in stories throughout the ancient world. In South Asia, they could be associated with divine figures. In other cultures, they could represent cleverness, mischief, or exotic lands. They were also simply entertaining. A king surrounded by serious ministers might occasionally appreciate something that climbed a tree and stole fruit. The palace could become very solemn. Monkeys were useful reminders that nature had not received the memo. And elephants had their own personalities. Ancient writers often commented on the intelligence and abilities of elephants. Some described them as capable of learning commands. Others told stories about elephants displaying unusual behavior. Some stories are difficult to verify. Ancient writers were not always careful historians. They loved remarkable stories. If an elephant did something surprising, the story could become more surprising each time it was retold. Eventually, the elephant might become almost philosophical, or patriotic, or emotionally devastated by the death of its owner. Ancient literature has a tendency to give animals rather dramatic emotional lives. Still, behind the exaggeration was a real observation. Elephants were intelligent animals. They could remember. They could learn. They could recognize individuals. And they could develop strong social relationships. This was probably obvious to anyone who spent years working with them. A royal court might therefore have had elephants that were genuinely well known. Certain animals could acquire reputations. One elephant might be calm, another stubborn, another unusually aggressive, another exceptionally obedient. The king might have favorites. The handlers certainly would. And once an animal became famous, stories could accumulate around it. This was especially true when animals were associated with rulers. The ancient world loved stories about kings, and kings loved stories about themselves. So if an elephant did something impressive, someone was probably going to remember it. Perhaps it carried the king safely through a difficult journey. Perhaps it behaved bravely in battle. Perhaps it participated in a grand ceremony. Or perhaps it simply refused to move, which honestly might have been the most memorable event of all. Imagine an important royal procession. Musicians are ready. Soldiers are standing in formation. Courtiers are waiting. The king is dressed in ceremonial clothing. Everyone has practiced. The drums begin, and the elephant sits down. Nobody has planned for this. The handlers begin negotiating. The musicians continue playing because stopping would make everything even more awkward. The king waits. The elephant remains unconcerned. Eventually, someone produces food. The elephant stands. The empire survives. History does not record the incident, probably. But these were the realities behind royal spectacle. Animals were living creatures. They did not always cooperate with human plans. And the larger the animal, the more obvious this became. This was one reason the relationship between royal authority and elephants was complicated. The king could command thousands of soldiers. He could order buildings constructed. He could issue laws. But he could not simply command an elephant to behave. He could train it. He could develop a relationship with it. He could surround it with handlers. But ultimately, the elephant remained an animal. That tension between power and nature was quietly fascinating. The ruler might control an enormous kingdom. Yet beside him stood an animal that could not be persuaded by royal titles. This is perhaps why elephants became such powerful symbols. They represented strength, but they also represented something beyond human control. Kings wanted to appear as though the entire world obeyed them. Elephants reminded everyone that some parts of the world did not. And perhaps that was healthy, even for kings, although they probably did not appreciate the lesson. Let's drift now toward another part of the ancient world, the great royal courts of the Near East. Here, too, exotic animals could become part of elite culture. Assyrian kings in particular were fascinated by hunting. Royal hunting scenes were carved into palace walls. Kings were shown confronting lions. They were shown standing in chariots. They were shown drawing bows. They were shown defeating animals that were presented as dangerous and powerful. These images were not casual decorations. They were political statements. The king was demonstrating control over chaos. The lion represented danger. The king represented order. And the king always won, at least in the palace carvings. Nobody commissioned a magnificent wall relief showing the king missing the lion and falling into a bush. Royal art had a clear public relations policy. The ruler was brave. The ruler was strong. The ruler protected the kingdom, and the ruler could kill a lion. The actual royal relationship with animals was therefore more complicated than the idea of pets. Some animals were companions. Some were symbols. Some were resources. Some were trophies. Some were military tools. And some were unfortunate participants in royal entertainment. This distinction matters because modern people often imagine a royal animal collection as a kind of ancient zoo. Sometimes it was, but often the meaning was much more personal. An animal could belong to a king You want to impress another ruler. You could send gold, expected. You could send jewels, also expected. You could send silk, useful. Or you could send an animal that the other ruler had never seen before. Now you have their attention. An exotic animal was a diplomatic gift that could not easily be ignored. The arrival of an elephant, monkey, giraffe, leopard, or unusual bird could become an event. People would gather. Servants would prepare. Officials would inspect the animal. Someone would write down where it came from. And the receiving king could announce that a foreign ruler had recognized his greatness. The animal became diplomacy with fur, or feathers, or very large ears. And elephants were particularly effective diplomatic gifts because they were so expensive. Sending an elephant was not like sending a basket of fruit. The animal had to travel. It needed food. It needed water. It needed handlers. It needed protection. And someone had to explain to everyone involved what the animal was supposed to do. The gift itself demonstrated that the sender had enough wealth and organization to transport something enormous over long distances. That was the message. The elephant arrived carrying no written political statement. It did not need one. Its existence was the statement. And the same principle applied to monkeys. A monkey from a distant region could be a small but memorable diplomatic curiosity. It could be presented to a king as something rare. The king could display it. Visitors could see it. And everyone could marvel at how connected the royal court had become to distant lands. This was particularly important in ancient empires where geography was a major obstacle. Today, a rare animal can be transported across continents relatively quickly. In antiquity, moving an animal hundreds or thousands of kilometers was a serious undertaking. So when an exotic creature appeared at court, it represented distance conquered. The world had been brought closer, and the king sat at the center of it. There was something almost theatrical about this. The palace became a miniature world. Plants from distant regions, spices from distant markets, textiles from distant kingdoms, animals from distant forests, and at the center, the ruler, a human being with the slightly unusual privilege of being able to say, "Bring me that," and someone would actually try. Of course, that privilege had consequences. Royal courts could become expensive, very expensive. The animals had to be fed, and exotic animals were not always suited to palace life. Some needed specialized environments. Some became ill. Some became stressed. Some died. And when an animal died, the court had to decide what to do. Perhaps it was buried. Perhaps its death was recorded. Perhaps another animal replaced it. Or perhaps the king simply moved on to the next interesting thing. This was one of the less romantic sides of royal collecting. The animal was valuable because it was rare, but its rarity also made it difficult to care for. The same thing happened with plants. A king might want a tree from a distant land. Getting the tree was one problem. Keeping it alive was another. Ancient royal gardens could therefore become laboratories of experimentation. People tried to grow plants that did not naturally belong in the region. They created water systems. They built shaded areas. They developed methods of transportation. The palace became a place where nature itself was being rearranged. And animals were part of that same process. The king's garden was not necessarily a natural environment. It was a designed world, a controlled version of nature. At least that was the intention. The monkey probably had other ideas, and so did the elephant. This is perhaps the central irony of royal animal keeping. Kings wanted to demonstrate control over nature, yet the animals constantly reminded them that nature was difficult to control. A monkey could escape, an elephant could refuse to move, a lion could become dangerous, a bird could fly away, a crocodile could ignore palace protocol entirely. Nature had no interest in royal etiquette, and perhaps that is why these animals remain so fascinating. They were beautiful symbols of power, but they were also reminders of the limits of power. So as the day slowly fades over our imaginary ancient palace, the courtyards grow quieter, the elephants settle down, the monkeys become less active, the servants finish their work, the king retreats indoors, and somewhere outside, an elephant stands beneath the stars. It has no idea that it represents royal authority. It does not know that diplomats admire it. It does not know that poets may someday write about elephants. It simply stands there, breathing, waiting for morning, and perhaps that is the quietest part of this entire story. For all the grandeur surrounding these animals, they were still animals. They lived inside human systems. They carried human meanings. But they had their own lives, their own memories, their own habits, and their own stubborn little decisions. Tomorrow, the king may have another plan for the elephant. The elephant, naturally, may have a different plan. And in royal history, that disagreement was sometimes where the most interesting stories began. And naturally, once kings realized this, they did what kings have historically done with almost everything impressive. They tried to put it into an army. The elephant was not invented as a weapon. It was simply an animal, a very large animal. But ancient rulers were remarkably creative when it came to turning useful creatures into military equipment. Horses became cavalry, oxen pulled carts, camels carried supplies, and elephants became walking platforms for soldiers. The idea seems strange to us, but in the ancient world, it made a certain amount of sense. An elephant was large enough to tower over infantry, could carry a rider, could carry equipment, could push through obstacles, and perhaps most importantly, unfamiliar elephants could frighten horses. This was useful. Ancient warfare depended heavily on formations. Soldiers had to stand together. Horses had to remain under control. Commanders had to maintain order. Then suddenly, across the battlefield, came an animal several meters high. Its ears moved. Its trunk moved. It made sounds that horses were not accustomed to hearing. And it kept coming. For soldiers who had never encountered elephants before, this could be terrifying. And ancient armies understood fear very well. They did not have modern explosives. They did not have tanks. They did not have aircraft. So if you possessed an animal that could create confusion simply by appearing, you had a military advantage. At least in theory. In practice, elephants were complicated. Very complicated. They needed food. They needed water. They needed trained handlers. They needed rest. They could become frightened. They could become injured. And, most inconveniently, they could panic. A panicking elephant was not particularly interested in the tactical plan. This could create a serious problem. Imagine being an ancient commander. You have spent months organizing your army. You have carefully placed your infantry. Your cavalry is ready. Your archers are waiting. Your elephant corps is positioned at the front. Everything looks perfect. Then one elephant becomes frightened, turns around. The elephant behind it also becomes frightened. Then another. Suddenly, several enormous animals are moving in the wrong direction, and the army discovers that elephants are not especially good at obeying the phrase, "Please remain calm." Naturally, military commanders tried to develop methods for controlling them. Handlers were essential. Training mattered. The animals had to become accustomed to noise, movement, people, and the chaos of battle. This was not a simple process. An elephant used for war had to be prepared for conditions very different from those of the forest. Drums, shouting, weapons, smoke, blood, running horses, hundreds or thousands of people. It was an overwhelming environment, and yet some elephants performed remarkably well. Their size and strength could be extremely useful. They could carry several men. The soldiers riding them could attack from a height. In some traditions, weapons could be mounted on or carried from elephant platforms. And the animals themselves could sometimes be directed toward enemy formations. Their presence could disrupt lines. But elephants were not invulnerable. Experienced armies learned how to deal with them. Some soldiers targeted the animals' legs. Others used projectiles. Some armies learned to make loud noises or use fire to frighten them. And eventually, elephants became part of an arms race. If your enemy had elephants, you needed a plan for elephants. If your enemy had more elephants, you needed a better plan. And so the elephant moved from royal symbol to military technology. The transformation was gradual, and perhaps the most famous example came in the Hellenistic world. After Alexander the Great's campaigns in Asia, the kingdoms that emerged from his empire came into greater contact with Indian elephants. Alexander himself encountered elephants during his campaign in the Indian subcontinent. The Battle of the Hydaspes, fought in 326 BCE, became especially famous because the army of King Porus used war elephants against Alexander's forces. For Alexander's soldiers, elephants were not an everyday sight. They were something unusual. The battle became one of the great encounters between Macedonian military organization and Indian elephant warfare. The Macedonian army eventually won, but the elephants left an impression, and Alexander's successors understood their value. The Hellenistic kingdoms began acquiring elephants of their own. The Seleucid Empire became particularly associated with war elephants. The Ptolemies in Egypt also maintained elephant forces. Suddenly, elephants were moving through the Mediterranean military world. They were no longer creatures that existed only in distant stories. They were part of royal strategy, and rulers competed over them. This is where the elephant becomes especially interesting as a symbol of kingship. A king with elephants could claim military sophistication. He could show that his kingdom had connections with distant regions. He could show that his army possessed unusual resources, and he could make his enemies wonder what else he had. Ancient warfare was partly physical, but it was also psychological. You wanted the enemy to believe you were stronger than you actually were. A line of elephants was an excellent way to encourage that misunderstanding. The animal itself did some of the propaganda. Nobody had to explain that elephants were large. Everyone could see it, and rulers understood that visual impressions could matter as much as written orders. This is why elephants frequently appeared in royal imagery, coins, sculptures, reliefs, ceremonial art. A king associated with elephants could present himself as powerful and victorious. But the relationship between rulers and elephants was not always about war. Sometimes the elephant was still a beloved royal possession. A ruler could become part of the royal identity. This is where the idea of the elephant as a pet becomes difficult. Modern people usually imagine a pet as a companion animal, a dog, a cat, perhaps a bird, something living inside or around the household. Ancient royal elephants existed in a different category. They could be companions, but they were also working animals, military assets, ceremonial objects, political symbols, and extremely expensive investments. The same elephant could have several identities. In the morning, it might be trained. Later, it might be washed and decorated. Then it might carry the king in a procession. And during wartime, it could be sent into battle. It was an animal with a remarkably complicated job description, and perhaps no one had bothered to ask whether it wanted one. The royal obsession with elephants also reveals something about ancient ideas of masculinity. Kings were expected to demonstrate strength. They were supposed to be hunters, warriors, conquerors, protectors. A king who appeared physically powerful was useful to the political imagination. The elephant reinforced that image. The ruler riding above the crowd on an enormous animal looked almost superhuman. He was elevated literally and symbolically. His clothing might be decorated. His weapons might be displayed. The elephant itself might be covered with royal colors and ornaments. It became a moving throne, and kings liked thrones. They were very committed to thrones, even when the throne had 4 legs and a trunk. This imagery continued in later South Asian kingdoms. Indian rulers developed elaborate elephant traditions. Royal elephant stables could become important institutions. The animals were classified, trained, and maintained. Elephant handlers could occupy specialized positions. Some elephants became famous. Certain rulers were known for their elephant forces. And in South Asian political culture, elephants remained associated with royal authority for centuries. The elephant was not merely a tool. It could represent the king's strength. In some contexts, it could also represent prosperity and good fortune. The symbolism became even more complicated through religion. Elephants appear repeatedly in South Asian religious traditions. The elephant-headed deity Ganesha became one of the most recognizable divine figures in Hinduism. Ganesha is associated with wisdom, beginnings, prosperity, and the removal of obstacles. His elephant head gave the animal an additional symbolic dimension. The elephant could represent intelligence and strength, could represent royal authority, could also carry religious meaning. This combination made elephants unusually powerful symbols. They belonged simultaneously to nature, politics, warfare, and religion, and rulers could draw from all of these meanings. A king could present his elephant as a military asset, as a ceremonial companion, as a symbol of prosperity, as part of a religious procession. The same animal could mean several things at once, and that is often how symbolism works. It is rarely tidy. Let's drift now toward another royal habit: hunting. Ancient kings hunted animals for sport, but hunting was rarely only about sport. It was another demonstration of authority. A king who hunted a lion was proving that he could confront danger. A king who captured an elephant demonstrated his control over powerful wildlife. In some societies, elephant hunting and capture became closely connected with royal authority. The process could be elaborate. Wild elephants were located. People studied their movements. Special techniques were used to capture them. Once captured, the animals had to be restrained and gradually trained. This could take a long time. An elephant could not simply be captured on Tuesday and expected to join the royal parade on Wednesday. There was training, patience, food, human contact, and a great deal of caution. The relationship between human and elephant was built gradually, and some elephants never became suitable for certain tasks. This was another reason experienced handlers were so important. The king might own the elephant, but the handler understood the elephant. That difference mattered. A ruler could issue commands. A handler had to understand behavior. This created a curious social hierarchy. The king stood at the top, but the elephant did not necessarily care. The handler stood much lower in the official hierarchy, yet the elephant depended on the handler. In practical terms, the handler might have more influence over the animal than the king. Ancient royal societies were full of these hidden relationships. Power did not always flow in a straight line, and animals made this especially obvious. A king might control a kingdom, but the person feeding the king's elephant could determine whether the elephant cooperated. It is a small reminder that every grand empire depended on ordinary people. The elephant simply made the dependency harder to hide. Now, while elephants were receiving all this royal attention, monkeys were continuing to cause problems elsewhere. The monkey did not have the same military importance. It did not carry soldiers into battle, at least not usually, but it had another advantage. It was entertaining, and royal courts needed entertainment. Life at court could be exhausting. There were ceremonies, meetings, diplomatic negotiations, religious rituals, family arguments, inheritance disputes, and endless opportunities for someone to become offended. A monkey could provide a welcome distraction. A royal monkey might be trained to perform simple behaviors. It might imitate people. It might be dressed in decorative clothing. It might be carried around, and it could become a curiosity for visitors. But monkeys were not always harmless. They could bite. They could scratch. They could steal. And they were intelligent enough to discover weaknesses in human systems. A servant might carefully place fruit on a table. The monkey might watch. The servant might leave. The monkey might take the fruit. This is not a sophisticated political conspiracy, but in a palace it could feel like one. Perhaps the monkey took a piece of jewelry. Perhaps it grabbed a document. Perhaps it simply climbed onto something it was not supposed to climb. Royal servants then had to recover the object without frightening the animal, because upsetting the king's favorite monkey was probably not a good career decision. This was one of the strange privileges of royal animals. They could sometimes become protected by the affection of powerful people. A normal animal could be removed if it caused trouble. A royal favorite was different. If the king loved the animal, everyone else had to tolerate it. This could create absurd situations. A monkey might be responsible for a series of minor disasters, yet nobody wanted to be the person who suggested getting rid of it. The king might interpret criticism of the monkey as criticism of himself, and royal courts were already full of enough dangerous misunderstandings. So everyone smiled. The monkey continued stealing fruit. History moved forward. The palace survived. This relationship between rulers and favored animals can be seen in many different cultures. Ancient elites often developed emotional relationships with animals. Dogs were especially common. Horses could become treasured companions. Birds were admired. Monkeys fascinated people. and elephants occupied a special category because of their enormous size and intelligence. The animal could be both intimate and public. A king might know an elephant personally. He might recognize its behavior. He might feed it. He might have it decorated for ceremonies. But at the same time, thousands of people could see that elephant as a symbol of royal power. Few animals could operate at both levels. That is why elephants became so persistent in royal traditions. They could be personal. They could be political. They could be religious. They could be military. And they could be beautiful. There was also a certain practical logic to having large animals associated with the court. Ancient rulers needed to be visible. In a world where most people would never enter the palace, the royal procession mattered. The king had to travel. He had to appear before subjects. He had to attend festivals. He had to visit temples. He had to receive ambassadors. And when the king traveled, the procession became a moving image of the state. Soldiers, musicians, officials, servants, flags, horses, and elephants. The whole thing moved slowly through the streets. The elephant made the procession unmistakably royal. People did not need to understand the details of government. They could see power. That was enough. And perhaps this is the most important reason ancient kings kept elephants. Not because elephants were convenient. They were not. Not because they were cheap. They absolutely were not. And not because they were easy to control. They certainly were not. They kept them because elephants created an impression. They transformed a human ruler into something larger. The king was no longer simply a man. He was the man who arrived on the elephant. The distinction mattered. Ancient monarchy depended heavily on symbols. A crown could be removed. A palace could burn. A statue could be destroyed. But for a moment, when the king appeared above a crowd on an enormous decorated elephant, the image was difficult to forget, and rulers understood the power of memorable images. The strange thing is that we still remember them. Thousands of years later, we look at ancient art and immediately recognize the elephant as a symbol of wealth and power. The ancient king has disappeared. The court is gone. The palace may be ruins. The language may no longer be spoken, but the elephant remains, quietly standing in the old artwork, his trunk raised, his body decorated, its human rider sitting above it. And perhaps the elephant is the one character in the entire scene that never cared about the political message. It was simply doing what elephants do, standing, eating, walking, remembering, waiting, and occasionally refusing to cooperate, which, when you think about it, makes the elephant a rather perfect companion for a king. Both were powerful. Both expected attention. Both could become extremely difficult when they did not get their way. And both had people around them whose job was essentially to keep them calm. The difference was that the elephant was probably more honest about it. So let's leave the battlefield behind now. The drums fade. The soldiers disappear into the distance. The elephants return to the royal grounds. Their armor is removed. Their decorations are taken away. They are washed, fed, and allowed to rest. Tomorrow may bring another ceremony, another procession, another journey, another battle, or perhaps nothing at all. And for an elephant, nothing at all is probably a perfectly respectable day. But our journey through the royal menagerie is not finished, because ancient rulers did not stop at elephants and monkeys. Once a king discovered that exotic animals could display wealth, curiosity, and power, the royal collection could become increasingly strange. Soon, palace courtyards would contain animals from distant deserts, forests, mountains, and rivers. Some would become symbols, some would become pets, some would become spectacles, and some would simply sit quietly in captivity while humans tried to decide what they meant. So, as the palace settles into another quiet night, we can slowly drift toward those other creatures, the strange animals that arrived from the edges of the ancient world, the gifts sent between rulers, the creatures that made foreign visitors stare, and the royal obsession with collecting pieces of the entire world, one animal at a time. The servants have gone to their quarters, and somewhere beyond the palace walls, the forests remain exactly as they were long before any king decided that an elephant would look rather impressive beside his throne. We have spent this evening following a curious little thread through ancient history. At first, it seemed like a simple question. Why did kings keep monkeys and elephants? But, as usual with history, the answer became considerably more complicated. They kept them because they were beautiful, because they were rare, because they were entertaining, because they were useful, because they could represent religion, wealth, military strength, royal authority, and the enormous reach of a kingdom. And sometimes, perhaps, because the king simply liked them. That last possibility is easy to overlook. We often imagine ancient rulers as enormous political machines. Kings issuing orders, queens arranging marriages, generals planning campaigns, priests performing ceremonies, diplomats exchanging carefully chosen words. But behind all of that were ordinary human emotions. A king could become attached to an animal. A queen could have a favorite bird. A prince could spend hours watching monkeys in a garden. A royal child could grow up alongside an elephant and remember it years later. History often records the wars. It records treaties. It records deaths. It records buildings. But the quiet affection between a human and an animal can disappear almost completely. And that is perhaps why royal animals are so interesting. They give us tiny glimpses of ordinary life inside extraordinary households. Imagine the palace early in the morning. The sun has barely risen. The stone courtyards are cool. Servants move quietly. Water is being carried. The kitchens are beginning to prepare breakfast. And the elephant handlers are already awake. They approach the animals. They speak softly. They bring food. They inspect their feet. They wash them. They know which elephant is calm, which one is impatient, which one wants food immediately, which one is likely to cause trouble. The king is still asleep. The emperor may be dreaming of battles. The ministers may be worrying about taxes. The royal family may be asleep beneath expensive blankets. But the elephants are already having breakfast. And honestly, they probably have the better arrangement. Their lives were complicated by captivity, training, and human demands. But at least their schedule did not involve listening to 3 hours of court officials arguing over a boundary stone. For the monkey, life was probably more chaotic. A monkey could spend the morning climbing, the afternoon stealing food, and the evening being blamed for something it probably did not do, or perhaps something it absolutely did do. Monkeys have never been particularly concerned with maintaining a respectable reputation. Their intelligence made them fascinating. Their behavior made them unpredictable, and their similarity to humans made them strangely entertaining. A monkey could hold an object, look at it, examine it, and then decide that the best thing to do was throw it. Humans recognized something familiar in that behavior. Perhaps that was part of the appeal. The monkey was different from us, but not entirely different, and that made it a perfect royal curiosity. The elephant was different in another way. It was enormously powerful, yet it could form relationships with people, could learn commands, could recognize individuals, could remember places and routines. That combination of strength and intelligence made it especially compelling. A king surrounded by elephants was surrounded by living reminders of the natural world. But those animals also revealed the limits of royal authority. The king could command an army. He could order a road built. He could imprison a rival. He could arrange a marriage. But he could not simply order an elephant to become happy. He could not command it to forget. He could not make it stop being an elephant. The animal remained partly beyond his control. And perhaps this is why the elephant became such a powerful royal symbol. It represented the dream of control, but it also represented the reality that nature always remained larger than the palace. There is something almost poetic about that. The ancient palace was designed to create order. Walls, gardens, columns, courtyards, guards, rules, ceremonies. Everything had a place. And then, in the middle of it all, stood an elephant, a creature that had evolved long before the palace existed. A creature that did not care about royal titles. A creature that could look at a king with the same calm expression it might give to a tree. There is something wonderfully humbling about that. And perhaps the monkey provided an even more direct lesson. Kings could surround themselves with enormous ceremony, but the monkey could still steal their fruit. Royal dignity was fragile. The monkey knew this, or at least it behaved as though it knew. Over centuries, the royal fascination with animals continued. Ancient kingdoms traded animals. Rulers exchanged them as diplomatic gifts. Empires transported them over long distances. Animals became part of military systems. They became religious symbols. They became decorations. They became entertainment. And they became part of the stories rulers told about themselves. The collection of animals became a way of collecting the world. A king who could display animals from distant regions could demonstrate the reach of his influence. He could say, without saying it directly, the world is large, but somehow pieces of it have arrived here, at my palace. For me, that was powerful. And in a world where travel was slow and dangerous, the arrival of an exotic animal could be genuinely astonishing. Imagine someone living in a small ancient village who had never seen an elephant. Then one day a royal procession passes, and there it is, an enormous animal, larger than anything the person has ever seen, decorated in cloth, surrounded by soldiers, moving slowly through the street. For that person, the king might have seemed almost supernatural. The elephant helped create that impression. The animal became part of the theater of monarchy. And perhaps this is why royal courts kept returning to exotic creatures. They were not just collecting animals. They were collecting wonder. And wonder is a useful political tool. People remember what astonishes them. A tax decree is easily forgotten. A procession of 20 elephants is not. A speech may disappear. A monkey sitting on a royal throne is likely to become a story. A palace garden full of ordinary flowers is pleasant. A garden containing an animal from a distant continent becomes memorable. Kings understood memory. They wanted to be remembered as powerful, successful, wealthy, divinely favored, courageous, and sometimes simply extraordinary. Animals helped, but there is a quieter side to this history. The animals themselves paid the price for royal fascination. Capturing wild animals was dangerous. Transporting them was difficult. Captivity could be stressful. Animals could become sick. Some did not survive. Others spent their lives in environments very different from their natural habitats. The royal collection looked magnificent from the outside, but from the animal's perspective, it could be a very strange existence. An elephant that once traveled through a forest might spend years in a confined royal compound. A monkey that once lived with its own kind might be separated from its natural group. The ancient world did not have modern ideas about animal welfare. People certainly recognized that animals could suffer. They could observe fear, pain, stress, illness. But the ethical frameworks were different. Animals were often understood primarily through their usefulness to humans. They could be food, labor, transportation, entertainment, symbols, or property. The idea that a wild animal might have a life of its own, independent of human purpose, was not always given the importance it receives today. So the royal menagerie had two sides. One was magnificent, the other was deeply human, and therefore imperfect. The king saw a symbol. The servants saw a responsibility. The animal simply experienced its own life. These perspectives could exist simultaneously. That is one of the most useful things to remember when looking at history. People in the past were not simply good or bad. They were complicated. They could admire animals and still keep them captive. They could care for an elephant deeply and still send it into battle. They could treat a monkey almost like a member of the family and still keep it chained. They could believe animals were sacred and still use them for political purposes. Human beings have always been very good at holding contradictory ideas at the same time. Kings were no exception, and perhaps that is where we should leave them. Not on a battlefield, not in a dramatic palace confrontation, not with a final royal disaster, just quietly. A king sleeping somewhere inside his palace, a queen resting in another chamber, servants moving through dark corridors, guards standing beneath the stars, and outside the elephants, their huge bodies barely visible in the moonlight, their breathing slow, their movements gentle. For a few hours, there are no ceremonies, no armies, no diplomats, no royal speeches, no political intrigue, just animals resting. The monkeys are somewhere nearby, perhaps asleep, perhaps not. One is probably still awake. There always seems to be one. Maybe it is sitting quietly on a branch. Maybe it is watching the moon. Maybe it is wondering where tomorrow's breakfast will come from. Perhaps it has already noticed something shiny that belongs to a servant. We will never know, and that is part of the charm. The ancient world left us fragments, broken statues, coins, temple walls, royal inscriptions, paintings, stories, archaeological remains, and occasionally descriptions of animals that once stood beside people whose names we still remember. The kings are gone. The palaces have faded. The empires have collapsed. The royal families disappeared into the long procession of history. But the elephant remains, still enormous, still intelligent, still capable of remembering. still moving slowly through forests, still looking at human beings with that same ancient expression. And perhaps the monkey has the final word. After all the royal ceremonies, after all the military campaigns, after all the treasure, after all the carefully arranged displays of power, the monkey is still a monkey. Climbs. It watches. It steals. It eats. It sleeps. And it continues being completely unimpressed by the complicated ambitions of kings, which may be the most sensible attitude anyone in the palace ever had. So tonight, as we slowly leave the ancient world behind, remember the strange little lesson hidden inside this history. Kings wanted to possess the extraordinary. They wanted rare animals, rare jewels, rare spices, rare fabrics, rare knowledge. They wanted the world gathered around them, but the world was never truly theirs. The elephant remained an elephant. The monkey remained a monkey. The forest remained the forest. And beyond the palace walls, nature continued quietly without asking permission from anyone. Empires rose. Empires fell. Dynasties married. Dynasties collapsed. Kings inherited crowns. Princes lost them. Palaces were built. Palaces became ruins. But somewhere in the darkness, an elephant kept breathing. Slowly. Calmly. Unconcerned. And perhaps that is a peaceful place to end our journey. So let the palace fade. Let the torches grow dim. Let the footsteps disappear down the corridors. Let the last sounds of the royal court become distant. The elephants are resting. The monkeys are quiet. The king is asleep. And for once, nobody needs anything from anyone. No battle needs to be fought. No kingdom needs to be conquered. No royal marriage needs to be arranged. No minister needs to be blamed. And no monkey needs to explain where it found the crown. Everything can simply wait until morning. Good night.